The night was absolute. It was an ocean of cold, silent ink, and the campfire was a tiny, desperate island of light and heat. Jake tossed another piece of greasewood onto the flames. It hissed, spitting a fountain of orange sparks that briefly illuminated the woman's face before vanishing into the oppressive dark. She hadn't spoken, not in the 6 hours since he'd cut her free. He found her tethered to a dead-bolted post in the cellar of a burned-out trading post. The place had stunk of smoke, whiskey, and the metallic temps of fresh blood. The men who'd taken her were long gone, having taken what they wanted and left her for dead, or perhaps for a slower, more malicious fate. He'd been tracking them for 3 days, not for her, but for the bounty on their leader, a man named Silas Reed. Finding her had been an inconvenience, a complication. Now, she sat on the other side of the fire, her knees drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped around them. The tattered remains of a simple calico dress barely covered her. Her dark hair was a matted tangle, her face smudged with soot and streaked with dried tears. But it was her eyes that held him. They were fixed on the fire, but they weren't seeing the flames. They were seeing the cellar, seeing the faces of the men, seeing whatever fresh hell she had just been pulled from. Jake was a man of few comforts, and even fewer words. He'd spent the last 10 years living in the saddle, trusting only his horse and the colt at his hip. He understood the language of the wilderness, the track of a shod horse, the snap of a twig, the silence of a circling hawk. He did not understand this. He did not understand the trembling, hollow-eyed silence of the woman across from him. He'd offered her his canteen. She'd taken it with a shaking hand, her fingers brushing his. Her skin was ice cold. She drank, a desperate, gasping sound, then handed it back. He'd offered her a strip of jerky. It still sat on the ground beside her, untouched. "You need to eat," he said. His voice, rough from disuse, sounded like stones scraping together. She flinched at the sound, her gaze snapping from the fire to his face. He saw it all in that one, wide-eyed look, raw terror, confusion, and a desperate, animalistic will to bolt. He was just another man, another threat. He held up his hands, palms open. "I'm not them," he said, the words feeling useless. "I'm the one who cut you loose. Remember?" She just stared. The firelight carved deep shadows under his cheekbones and across the brim of his hat. To her, he probably looked no different from the men who had taken her. He was just the one who had, for some unknowable reason, stolen her from them. He sighed, a low, frustrated sound. He pulled his saddle blanket from his roll and tossed it across the small space between them. It landed at her feet. "It'll get colder," he said. He turned his back to her then, a deliberate, calculated gesture. He sat, staring out into the blackness that surrounded their small island. It was the only way he could think of to show her he wasn't a threat, to give her a moment of peace. He heard a small, shuffling sound, a hesitant rustle of wool. He didn't look back. He just listened to the pop and crackle of the fire and the vast, empty silence of the prairie. After a long time, he heard a new sound, the quiet, ragged sound of her, finally, weeping into the folds of his blanket. They rode for 2 days. The high plains were a relentless sun-baked expanse, a pale straw-colored sea that stretched to every horizon. Jake rode his buckskin, a rangy, durable horse named Cinder. The woman rode the mare he'd liberated from the trading post's corral, a nervous bay that matched its rider's temperament. He kept a steady, ground-eating pace, stopping only to water the horses at a muddy creek or to rest in the meager shade of a high-backed boulder during the worst of the midday heat. He hadn't pushed her. He hadn't asked questions. He'd simply pointed south and said, "We're heading for the Cimarron. There's a settlement there." She, in turn, had remained silent, but it was a different silence. It was no longer the hollow, shell-shocked stillness of the first night. This was a watchful, wary silence. He saw her studying him when she thought he wasn't looking. She watched how he moved, how he checked his rigging, how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon. She ate the food he gave her. She rode without complaint. She was a survivor. He'd give her that. The brittle, broken thing from the cellar was being replaced, hour by hour, by someone made of whipcord and steel. The second night, he built another fire. The air was cooler, with a bite that promised an early autumn. He'd shot a rabbit that afternoon, and the smell of it roasting over the fire was a small, savory comfort. He handed her a piece on the end of his knife. She took it, this time without hesitating. She ate, her gaze on the flames. The firelight was softer on her now. He'd given her a spare shirt, and she wore it like a tunic, cinched with a piece of rope. She had washed her face and hair at the creek. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe not yet 20. "Lena," she said. Jake looked up, surprised. He'd been cleaning his revolver. He stopped, the oiled rag in his hand. "Ma'am, my name, it's Lena." Her voice was quiet, a little hoarse, but it was clear. He nodded, slowly. "Jake?" She looked at him, her eyes meeting his directly for the first time. The fear was still there, but it was buried deep, banked like a coal. Now, there was just an intense, burning question. Why? Why what? Why did you come back for me? Those men, the Red Hand, they'd have killed you. Jake resumed his cleaning, his movements methodical. "Wasn't coming for you. I was tracking them. There's a price on Silas Reed. Found you instead. Bad luck for him, I suppose." He saw the flicker of disappointment in her face. He'd shattered some illusion of a white knight. Good illusions were dangerous out here. My family," she said, her voice catching. "Our homestead. They came at dawn. My PA, my brother, ... They didn't stand a chance." She looked down at her hands. "They took me," said Reed, collecting things. "I was in that cellar for 3 days. Then you came." "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am," Jake said. It was what people said. The words felt like empty brass. "Are you a lawman?" "No, a bounty hunter." He paused. "Sometimes, when the price is right." He snapped the cylinder shut. Reed's price was right. "So you're still after them," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am." He holstered the pistol. "But first, I'm getting you to Agua Fria. It's a settlement on the Cimarron. You can get a stage from there. Find a marshal. Tell your story." Lena was quiet, staring back into the fire. "They'll come looking for you." "For me? For that mare?" Reed doesn't let things go. "Let him come," Jake said, the words a low growl. He looked out into the darkness, his hand resting on the butt of his pistol. "He's worth more alive, but I'm not particular." He felt her eyes on him again, that same watchful, probing gaze. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man with a set of skills and a need to eat. But as he looked at her, a young woman who had lost everything and was still sitting upright, he felt an old, unfamiliar stirring, a cold, hard knot of anger that had nothing to do with the bounty. The third day brought the first real change in her. The steel he had glimpsed was beginning to show. She rode more confidently, less like a passenger, and more like a partner in the grim business of survival. She spoke more, asking practical questions. "How do you know which way to go? How can you tell that track is a day old? Why do you keep looking north?" He answered, in his usual clipped, economical way. "The sun. The edges are windblown. Because that's where trouble will come from." He was, in fact, impressed. She was sharp. She saw everything. She'd spent her life on the prairie and understood its hard arithmetic. She had been a victim, but she was not, he was beginning to realize. A victim by nature. That night, the fire felt different. It was less of an armed truce and more of a shared camp. The island of light felt a little bigger, a little safer. After they ate, Jake didn't turn his back. He sat, sipping the bitter coffee he'd boiled in a tin can. "You handle a gun?" he asked. She looked up from the fire. "My PA taught me. A rifle. For hunting. Not like this. This is different," he agreed. He stood, walked to his saddlebags, and pulled something out. It was a small, .32 caliber pocket revolver, a Donsal gun. Small, but lethal at close range. He walked over and held it out to her, but first. She recoiled, as if he'd offered her a snake. I can't." "You can," he said, his voice flat, insistent. "And you will. I can't be two places at once. If they come, I'll be busy. You will not be helpless. Not again." The words hit their mark. Her eyes hardened. The tremor in her hand was still there, but she took the gun. It looked impossibly small in her grasp. "It's loaded," he said, sitting back down. "5 shots. Don't pull the trigger unless you mean to kill what you're aiming at. It's got a kick, so hold it tight. And for God's sake, don't point it at me." She held it, staring at it as it lay in her palm. It was a cold, heavy piece of metal. It was an ugly, terrible thing, and it was, she realized, the first bit of power she had held in a week. "Who are you, Jake?" she asked, her voice low. "You're no bounty hunter. Not just. You ride like a ranger." Jake took a long swallow of coffee. He stared into the embers, his face a mask of old memories. "I was, once, a long time ago. Texas. What happened? A job went bad, a town called Tres Lomas. We were supposed to be rescuing hostages. Turned out the banker who hired us just wanted his competition wiped out. We rode in hard. It was a mistake. A lot of folks died who shouldn't have. I turned in my badge the next day. Been riding ever since." He fell silent, the admission hanging in the air. He hadn't told anyone that story in 5 years. Lena looked from the gun to his face. She saw the lines etched around his eyes, the permanent tension in his jaw. He wasn't just running toward a bounty. He was running from Tres Lomas. "You saved me," she said. "I was at the right place, at the right time, or the wrong one, depending on how you look at it." "No," she said, her grip tightening on the small pistol. "You saved me." A sound cut through the night. The high, thin yip of a coyote, answered by another, closer. But then, a different sound. The soft, metallic shing of a horse shod with iron, striking a rock. It was distant, miles away, but it was unmistakable. Jake was on his feet in an instant, his rifle in his hand. He kicked dirt over the fire, plunging their camp into a sudden, shocking darkness. The only light was the cold, distant glitter of the stars. "Get your things," he whispered, his voice ablaze. There was no time for fear. The darkness Jake had plunged them into was a shield, but it was also a terror. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird in a cage. She could hear nothing but the wind and the pounding of her own blood. The pocket revolver felt impossibly small in her hand. Saddlebags. Canteens. Jake's whisper was right next to her ear, making her jump. "Move quiet." He was a ghost in the dark. She heard him with his horse, the soft jingle of a bit, the whisper of leather being cinched tight. She fumbled for her own things, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the bedroll. "Leave it," he hissed. He grabbed her arm, his grip like a steel trap, and pulled her toward the horses. "We ride now. Stay low. No matter what, you stay right behind me. Don't stop. Don't look back. Understand?" "Yes," she breathed. He threw her onto the mare's back, then swung up onto Cinder. He didn't lead them south, toward the Cimarron. He led them east, back the way they'd come, into a maze of low-lying rocky hills they had spent the afternoon skirting. It was a gamble. He was counting on the trackers to assume he'd continue south. They rode for an hour, the horses picking their way through the starlit landscape. Every shadow was a man, every gust of wind a pursuing rider. Lena's entire world narrowed to the dark, broad-shouldered silhouette of the man in front of her. She held the reins in one hand and the cold, unfamiliar weight of the pistol in the other, just as the first sick, gray light of dawn began to stain the eastern sky. Jake pulled them to a halt behind a high-backed ridge. He slid from his horse and scrambled up the rocks, his rifle in hand. He lay flat, peering over the top. Lena waited, her breath held. The silence was agonizing. Jake slid back down, his face grim. 3 of them, he said. They cut our trail. They're moving fast. They'll be on us in 10 minutes. What do we do? Lena's voice was a dry croak. We don't run. Not here. The horses are tired, and the land is too open on the other side. This is where we stop them. He pointed to a narrow gap in the rocks, barely wide enough for a single horse. That's the only way through this ridge for a mile in either direction. They'll come through there. He tied the horses deep in a cluster of boulders. He checked his rifle, then his revolver. He looked at her. Stay here. With the horses. Keep them calm. He glanced at the small pistol in her hand. If one of them gets through me. ... You know what to do. No, Lena said. He stopped, turning. Ma'am, this ain't a discussion. No, she repeated, her voice shaking but gaining strength. I'm not a target. I'm not a hostage. I'm not hiding in a cellar. She pulled the spare box of cartridges he'd given her from her pocket. You have 1 rifle. You'll need to reload. I can do that. Jake stared at her for a long second. The terrified girl from the fire was gone. In her place was a woman who had drawn a line in the sand. He saw the ghost of Tres Lomas, the faces of the people he'd failed. He wouldn't fail this one. He nodded, once. All right? Stay behind this rock. You feed me the rifle. But if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. He settled himself into a V-shaped nook in the rock, his rifle resting on a flat stone, aimed directly at the gap, 50 yards away. Lena knelt behind him, her back to the rock wall, the Winchester cartridges heavy in her lap. They waited. The sun climbed, and the rocks began to warm. Then they heard it. The clatter of hooves on stone. A low male voice, laughing. 3 riders appeared in the gap. They were framed perfectly. Jake's rifle cracked. The sound was deafening. The lead rider, a heavy man in a red shirt, was thrown from his saddle. The other 2 scattered, diving for cover, their own guns blazing. Bullets pinged and whined off the rocks around them. A chip of stone stung Lena's cheek. Get down, Jake yelled. He fired again, missed. A rider shot back, the bullet thudding into the rock just inches from Jake's head. Jake ducked, working the lever. He fired. Another yell. The second man was down. The third man, shielded by his horse, was screaming curses. It was Silas Reed. You're a dead man, Ranger, Reed roared. He fired, and his horse, spooked, shied away, exposing him for a split-second dot. Jake fired. A dry, useless click. Empty. Rifle. He barked, his hand snapping back. Lena was already there. She'd fought the urge to close her eyes, to hide. She'd watched him fire, counted the shots. She slapped the Winchester into his hand, her fingers brushing his dot. Jake brought the new rifle up, aimed, and squeezed the trigger, all in one fluid motion. Silas Reed dropped. The silence that fell was as loud as the gunfire. Jake kept the rifle trained on the gap for a full minute. Nothing moved. He let out a long, ragged breath. He slowly stood, his legs unsteady. He looked down at Lena. She was pale, her knuckles white, but she was looking right back at him, her eyes clear and fierce. You did good, Lena, he said. We did, she corrected. We did, she corrected. It took them another day to reach the Cimarron River. The gunfight on the ridge had cost them. One of Reed's last wild shots had grazed the bay mare's flank. It was a flesh wound, but the horse was limping, and Lena had walked beside it for the last 5 miles. The anger and adrenaline of the fight had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. They hadn't spoken of what happened. They'd simply cleaned up the camp, taken the riders' horses and weapons, and moved on. The grim, silent work of survival. When they finally crested the last rise, the river was a muddy brown ribbon below them, snaking through a valley dotted with cottonwoods, and on the far bank, nestled in a bend, was a small, dusty collection of adobe buildings. Agua fria, Jake said, pulling Cinder to a halt. Lena stopped beside him, shading her eyes. It wasn't much. A cantina, a livery, a general store, and a few scattered houses, but it was the first sign of civilization she had seen in over a week. It was a world away from the cellar, from the fire, from the terrible silence and the sudden, deafening violence. They rode down the slope and forded the shallow river, the horses drinking gratefully. They emerged on the town's single dusty street. A few men on the cantina's porch stopped talking to watch them. A woman gathering laundry from a line paused, her eyes lingering on Lena's tattered clothes and the spare rifle slung on her saddle. Jake dismounted in front of the livery. He helped Lena down. She swayed, her legs unsteady after so long in the saddle. He turned to the liveryman. "See to these horses. My mare needs looking at." He handed the man a few coins. He then turned to Lena, pulling a small leather pouch from his vest. "There's a stage that comes through here twice a week," he said, his voice back to its usual, gruff tone. He pressed the pouch into her hand. "It's enough to get you to Santa Fe. You can find the marshal there. Tell him your story. This will get you a room at the hotel and a new dress." Lena looked at the pouch, then at his face. His eyes weren't meeting hers. He was looking past her, at the open road that led south out of town. "You're leaving?" she said. "I got business," he said, nodding toward the 3 horses they were leading. "Gotta find the nearest marshal myself. Cash in a bounty. And then, I keep riding." He'd done his job. He'd gotten her to safety. He'd even, in a strange, violent way, avenged her family. The account was settled. He was free to go. The ghost of Tres Lomas was quiet, but when he looked at her, he didn't see an inconvenience. He saw the woman who had loaded his rifle while bullets sang around her. He saw the survivor who had found her voice in the embers. "Jake," she said, her voice quiet. She didn't plead. She didn't cry. She just held his gaze. "Where will you go?" "South. Mexico. Maybe. Somewhere quiet." "You'll never find it," she said softly. "Not out there. You'll just keep running." He had no answer for that. She was right. She stepped forward and pressed the .32 revolver back into his hand. "I don't think I'll need this anymore." Then she did something that shocked him. She reached up and put her hand on his arm. "Thank you, Jake, for my life." She turned and walked away, her back straight, toward the general store. Jake stood there for a long time, the small cold pistol in his hand. He watched her go. He watched her push open the door and disappear inside. He felt the pull of the open road, the familiar itch to get on his horse and disappear. It was all he knew. He looked at the pouch of money in his other hand. It was the bounty on Silas Reed. He looked at the saloon, at the long, empty road. He let out a long breath, the sound of a man who had been holding it for 5 years. He pocketed the pistol. He walked not to his horse, but to the town's small cantina. He tied the lead ropes of the bounty horses to the rail. He went inside, sat at a table in the corner, and ordered a coffee. He would wait. He would wait to see her walk out of that store. He would wait to make sure she got on that stage, and then, well, he'd figure that part out. For the first time in a long time, the running could wait.